I've only ever done that once.
And if I fall asleep halfway through, it's because I'm really tired.
What were you chopping down for 3 hours?
We have some dead trees in the backyard. So I started yesterday with the big one, and then we had a bunch of other ones we dug up or chopped down, and you take the branches off. And so that's what we've been spending the last couple of days doing.
Yeah.
In 90 degrees.
Yeah, because why not? Yeah, let's not do that in the fall when it's 60 or 70. That's just ridiculous.
Of course. You know how I am. Stop being bullheaded.
All right. Hello and welcome to the Valley today. I am your host, Janet Michael. You are listening to the show, obviously, today on a Monday afternoon. However, I do want to let you know that we have pre-recorded it on a Sunday afternoon because that is the only time that I could nail down my fearless leader, Andrew Shearer. He is the owner of the River 95.3 and SportsRadio 1450, which then by default makes him president of Royal Broadcasting. And that's my first question for you, Andrew. How did you come up with the name Royal Broadcasting? Is it just a play off of Front Royal?
Well, it is. I will tell you that it'll be, by the way, it'll be 20 years, August 15th, that I have owned the radio stations. That's the 20th anniversary of Royal Broadcasting, the company, purchasing WZRV and WFTR, which at the time were both WFTR AM and FM. But that's a whole different story, and that would take an hour and a half to tell you how we got to where we are.
It's a history lesson.
But no, it really was one of the things a lot of people may or may not realize. I live in Delaware. And Delaware's got these wonderful, great corporation laws, and, you know, all the Fortune 500 companies are licensed in Delaware. We're licensed in Virginia for a number of reasons. One, I'm still a small town, small market, local kind of guy. So even though I reside in Delaware, I have, you know, I lived in Winchester for a number of years. I have spent time in Front Royal for the last 20 plus years. And so, yeah, I was, you know, Royal Broadcasting is an homage to Front Royal. I want to make sure that people realize that I'm committed to serving my local community, county, and Commonwealth.
You're really like me in that too. I don't live in Front Royal, Warren County, but we're probably as local as non-local people can be.
I think with a good wind, you could probably spit and hit the county border.
Oh, I've tried to spit, but if we want to, that's a whole nother show too. So we're not even going to get into that. So then, you know, you came on and did a show with me back in March when COVID-19 first became wasn't as widespread as it is now. I think we had our last conversation at the very edge of the shutdown, and we talked a little bit about what you as a small business owner were doing to keep us as your employees safe. But talk to me about being a small business owner of a radio station, because it is still a small business, but it's not a traditional small business like a restaurant or a retail shop. What was going through your mind, and how have you coped with this pandemic?
Well, I will tell you that my mission statement has been and will continue to be serving the local community. And as such, you know, part of what we do, a lot of what we do is being in the community, whether it's broadcasting live from a blood drive or a high school or college football game, or just being part of the fabric of what happens in those counties and communities. You know, Camping for Hunger, for example, and that's something we can talk about very briefly about how that's going to look this year. But, you know, I have, you know, being a radio station, we're not a retail shop where people come in to see us regularly. We have visitors, we have guests, we have people who win prizes, we have people who bring public service announcements. We have what I call FORs, friends of the radio station, will stop by. And so that end of it was a little easier to manage than the other side of us going out and having to say, you know what, we're not going to be able to broadcast live at blood drives for a while. It's tough for me because that's part of what I've always done and what we've always done. And I mentioned Camping for Hunger and how we're going to manage that and navigate that threshold. But really the bottom line is you've got to look back at the safety protocols necessary to make sure that everybody is safe, you know, no matter where you are on the spectrum, whether you're fully immune to everything on the planet or you've got a system that's completely compromised, we're all running into each other on a daily basis. And so whether we're in the house or we're outhouse, sorry.
I'm not going to edit that out.
out in the community, we had to be thoughtful and mindful of not just what the protocol from the state was going to be, but what we needed to do as well.
And I know that you were one of the first people to apply for the PPP loan, because there is still the business end of it. Separate and apart from the community, there is still the business end of it. And that had to be pretty daunting to you going into this, because so many of our customers are other small businesses. What were you thinking from a business perspective?
Survive. It is. I hate to be that blatant about it, but a lot of people wonder how a radio station operates. I mean, you have to have your head under a rock to not realize that we get advertising. And advertising comes from other small businesses who are selling their services, retail or service or whatever it happens to be. They want to advertise it to the community. Well, if you don't have a community that's able to get to you, a lot of people will say, what's the point of advertising? I can't invite people in. They're not able to come see me. Restaurants did a great job of mitigating that with, curbside pickup. I know stores and shops up and down the Shenandoah Valley had by appointment only. So there were some ways of commerce continuing at that small retail level, but 90% of my revenue comes from advertising. And so when you think of that huge loss, and I will be very honest with listeners, we lost a lot of money from people who said, I don't have anything to advertise right now. I can't advertise with you. Or I was going to come on and advertise with you for the next 3 months or 6 months or a year, but I'm going to wait because I don't have anything to advertise right now. That had a major impact on how we do operations. Without PPP, I would have probably had to have laid off somebody. Just like every other small business has had to either close its doors or furlough people or lay them off, I would have been among the same type of environment. Fortunately, PPP allowed us to maintain a level of operation, which is necessary, particularly from a broadcaster, that who, what, where, when, that continuing the informational flow, which we would have had to give up some of that. From a news and community service standpoint, we may not have been able to serve as was necessary in order to be part of that media. And be part of that information flow so that people had accurate information, updated information, regular information, including this show, by the way. This show has done a great job in the last 90 days of maintaining that information flow and giving people health updates and service updates and all of the things that have been necessary in the last 90 days to make sure that people are feeling safe and feeling empowered. I didn't have to do any of that because of the PPP. That has allowed us to maintain our level of service so that has been something we've been able to continue. As we move forward and as things start to thaw a little bit more, I'm hoping that the uptick in revenue and the uptick in advertising will allow us, and I'll be blunt, we have a window, and I look at that and say, okay, in 60 days or 90 days, if I don't have X amount of dollars, I can't pay people, I can't keep the lights on. I'm the same as any other small business owner and operator who has the same types of issues. I have to maintain a level of cleanliness at the building now that we're going to have more people coming in. I have to maintain a level of health and safety for the staff to make sure that they feel comfortable doing things. But we also need to continue serving our community. So that's the tightrope I walk.
Well, and I know where some small businesses, restaurants, for example, they still had overhead expenses of their rent and the lights and food costs. Retail businesses still had to maintain and manage an inventory. You have similar issues because you still had to pay music fees. You still had to pay all of the things that happen behind the scenes for a radio station to still operate outside of me for the show and your staff and salaries and things like that.
Well, I'm licensed by the federal government. The Federal Communications Commission licenses me, in service of the community. And I can't just shut the lights off and go home for a while until this passes. I have to maintain a certain minimum level of service in order to maintain that license. And that's, broadcasting in good faith. And so, yeah, there are things, the transmitters need to stay on and the generators need to be available and all the infrastructure of a radio station. The staffing is probably 60% of my expenses. So making sure that people are paid because it is a service-based industry. But if the lights go out, guess what? We can't broadcast. If the phones go out, guess what? We can't broadcast. And so we have to be able to pay those bills as well. So there's been a small, and I do mean small, downtick in expenses, only because we're not running around as much as we used to. But that doesn't equal the fact that I still have to maintain 90% of the rest of my expenses at the level they were before, simply to maintain that broadcasting in the public trust.
Was it more complicated for you, do you think, because you mentioned at the top of the show that you live in Delaware? Do you think it would have been easier for you if you lived just down the street or in Winchester still, for example, to kind of manage and maintain all of this? Or do you feel like it didn't really matter where you were, you still had a job to do and you just got it done?
Well, there's two answers to that. Number one, absolutely not, because we, for a period of time, had weekly staff meetings where we weren't all in the same room. We went into it, put into effect no more than 2 people in the building at any one time. And the bottom line of all that is that I have a very good staff that I trust to take care of business on a day-to-day basis. Now, I'm the idea guy. I'm the big picture guy. I'm the guy who looks at what's going to happen in 9 months, 18 months, 36 months. So the other answer, I said there were 2 answers, is absolutely I was concerned and terrified because I grew up as a service radio kind of guy, 35 years of doing this. When it snowed, I'm the first guy there to shovel. You know, when there's a hurricane, I'm the first guy there to broadcast and provide that information. All my life, that's what I've done. So being here 3 hours away was terrifying to me on an emotional level, on a mental health level. But I turned things over to all of you, to the Janets and the Liz's and the Randys and the Lonnies and the Alyssas of the world, and you took care of me.
And the Cathys.
And the
Can't forget the
Kathy.
Cathys.
Without Kathy, there is none of this. But you took care of me and you took care of the community, and that's at the end of the day, that's really what matters. Is people that work for us and work with us at Royal Broadcasting care about doing this.
Well, let's take a break. When we come back, I want to talk about something you mentioned a second ago about being the idea guy and how you're always looking at 60 and 90 days out, because I know that's a big piece of this for other small businesses right now that are trying to come out of this. Phase 3 may have opened even more doors for them. Can we talk a little bit about numbers and who's listening to the radio, what advertising options are available? Because that's going to be a benefit to you, but it's going to be an even greater benefit to a lot of our community to know how they can grow their business and get those people back in the door?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay,
sure.
We'll do all of that when we come back. We are pre-recording today's conversation with Andrew Shearer. He is the owner of the River 95.3 and Sports Radio 1450. He's making faces and doing weird things with me right now on the Zoom screen, which you'll be able to see on our YouTube channel. The link will be up on the podcast page in just a little bit this afternoon. But we're going to come back and continue this conversation with Andrew in just a couple of minutes. Ta-da! I did a post on the Facebook page for the YouTube channel, specifically for my playlist on the YouTube channel.
Oh, yeah?
And then I boosted it and I paid for it because it was my boost. And people that's not huge, but I've gotten more views on the shows than I had before I put the thing up on Facebook. So, because I think sometimes people think it's cool to hear what we talk about during the breaks and see what's going on. And
this motion, for those of you who are trying to figure it out, I was out cutting down dead trees for the last 4 hours, which is why this is the window that I have, so my arms rest up so I can go finish the job when we're done.
Well, and you know what's funny to me, having done this on Zoom? So before, when we would do shows in the studio and people would come in, they would still be sitting right across from me. We'd be having these conversations. Rarely did I have a situation where somebody would say, well, look at this, Janet, because it's as if they were sitting in that studio and they knew we were on the radio. But now that I'm having these conversations on Zoom, they're not thinking twice about holding something up to say, see, this is what I mean. And I'm like, do you not get that people listening to this right now are not going to see what it is you're showing me?
I used to do a radio show very similar to this when I was in Philadelphia 25 years ago. We did this from a bar. And I would, for 2 hours, it was 11 to 1 on Friday. So we had this live bar show. It was called Talk of the County was the show. And I had all kinds of great guests would come in. The best segments would be in between during the commercial breaks. that's when people would open up and they'd talk, and then all of a sudden, you come back from the commercials and we were live. So you hear the little bug in your ear. Okay, sure, you got 5 seconds, 4, 3, 2, and we're back on Talk of the County, and the guest would shut up. Where was 3 minutes ago?
I know it's completely and totally insane. So, and the video is the other thing that it's reminded me of is over the last 4 years since I've been doing the show. I mean, I know people now and I'm really, really good friends with people now that I didn't know from Adam when I took over the show. And it's because they're regulars or we've just gotten to know each other. And the number of shows that I can't put on YouTube because of what we talk about during the breaks is that number is a little more staggering than I care to admit. All right, well, let's knock out the last segment.
Okay.
Welcome back to the Valley today. I am your host, Janet Michael. Thanks for listening to us on a Monday afternoon, but I do want to make sure you know we have pre-recorded today's show on a Sunday afternoon. Andrew Shearer is sharing a Zoom screen with me. That was a mouthful. Andrew Shearer Zoom screen. We are pre-recording today's show to have this conversation because, Andrew, I thought it was important that people understand how the station works, what your role is in the station, and then what the station's role is in the community, because that's your overarching priority for all of this.
Oh, absolutely. We've again been doing this for 20 years now. I made no bones about it when I came to the Valley, when I came to the market. I'd lived there before. I lived in Winchester back in the mid 80s, and absolutely adore the Valley. But I have family here in Delaware. My wife she's been working for 25 years. She's a PhD in microbiology and works at the University of Delaware. My family's here. I have no trouble getting in a car and driving 3 hours. And I did that for a number of years. But as I've gotten less young, I've kind of taken steps back because, at the end of the day, you got to set things up and trust people are going to do the right thing. And so there are times when I have to take the leap and say, you know what, you guys are going to take care of it. I'm gonna be there to either pick up the pieces or applaud you, whichever one happens. I'm a big believer in kick them and kiss them. We'll critique what happened and we'll fix it and we'll move forward. And I rarely have to kick somebody to the point where things are that bad, because I think for the most part, in 20 years, everybody's had the right idea of what this is supposed to be and how this radio station and this service is supposed to look. It's rare that we've had anybody in there who didn't get it and didn't want to try. I've always said errors in commission are acceptable, errors in omission are not.
Yeah, and that's the one thing that I think that has struck me because I had my business for 20 plus years before I became part of the station's family. I was concerned. I mean, I had not worked for somebody in a lot of years, but it really wasn't like I was working for somebody because I realized pretty early on that you do a lot of the hiring based on the overall picture. And you're hiring people that share the same thought process, the same value, more so because you can train anybody to do anything.
Right.
But it's more about everybody being on the same page and working together as a team. So it was really kind of easy for me, at least initially. There have been some bumps in the road.
And there always will be. There always will be. When you get competing ideas, I want competing ideas. This democracy is based on competing ideas. The fact that the United States was founded on competing ideas. All the best businesses are founded on competing ideas. Because what happens is you take two ideas and you let them both percolate. One will naturally rise to the top. That doesn't mean the other one crashes and burns, but it may not rise as quickly. And then you find out where you need to be based on how that idea rises. And I think from a staffing standpoint, our core staff has been together almost since day one. People who have come in since then have been there. You've been with us for, I lost, and don't take this the wrong way, I've lost count. Liz as the sales manager has been with me. I've lost count, and so those are the people that you've lost count of how long they've been there that have made that kind of positive impact.
You mentioned something in the first segment about the 60, 90-day outlook. And I think right now I do these Marketing Matters Facebook Live conversations with Nikki from the Front Royal Chamber. And one of the ones that we did a few weeks ago was talking about how to temper your welcome back message with we're following all the safety protocols. And the big thing that we talked about is not so much your message right now today, but thinking about what your message needs to be in 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, or 6 months. People don't realize now that this shutdown has lifted, radio is kind of their lifeline to information, to music, to think about what's going on in the real world. And you always follow the numbers. You know that to be an absolute fact.
I do. I've watched the trending since people have been quarantined at home, since back in March, watching how radio has impacted people, how national news has impacted people, how radio, television, newspaper, online stuff, as we watched, again, talking about the marketplace of ideas and how that have been implemented by the large nationals versus the locals versus the print versus the cable versus the radio, and watching how we have been continued to be a trusted voice for people to find out the who, the what, the where, the when. Listenership in radio has actually gone up since people have been home because they're home. And not to say that people didn't listen when they were at work or in their offices or in the retail stores, but it's because of the information flow that has become so important to people over the last 90 days to find out when phase 2 is going to be enacted and what does phase 3 look like and what is the governor stating and what's happening with, in Washington, D.C. and the protests and those things that have happened over here in the last month or so. Keeping that information flow fresh and relevant. Two of the words that I often use in my news department is relevant and significant. And it's that the audience trusts that we are going to be relevant and significant. And so that has percolated and turned around to showing a demonstrable increase in listenership, not just the amount of people listening, but the time that they spend listening. It's gone from an average of 43 minutes in morning drive to 59 minutes in morning drive. That's a significant increase in people spending time listening to you. And so they have to trust, and it's not just the river. I mean, every other radio station in the marketplace and every other station in the Mid-Atlantic region and across the country have all had an uptick. But the ones that people trust are the ones that have had the biggest increase. And we're seeing that on the back end now is we're the ones that we're getting phone calls from national agencies looking to place business and advertising as those companies that they represent are starting to open up their doors a little bit more. I'm talking about the McDonald's and the Virginia lotteries and those types of things.
Well, the other piece of that is you also saw many years ago the value in making sure that getting in the car and turning on a radio wasn't the only way that you could listen to our radio station, because you can listen to it on our website. You can tell Alexa to play it for you and she'll do that. That's the other thing I think that probably has also helped across the board, but for us in particular, to gain those listeners because we're so much more accessible now than just getting in their car and listening.
This is my phone. On my phone, I can use the radio app to pull me up, and I can be sitting in my car in traffic and I can hit the radio app and listen to the river if I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. And so being accessible to people is, you're living in Delaware. People say, how do I listen to your radio station? And I tell them, pull up the website. There's a link, there's an icon that says listen live. Giving people the option and opportunity is more important today than it's ever been. So as I'm sitting at my home computer, because that's where I have to work now, I can have a screen open up, a window open up, listening to the radio station. I don't have to have a radio. 10 years ago, there was an average of 7 radios in everybody's household. Now that number is down to about 4.5. But that doesn't include the Alexas of the world. I mean, I'm talking about traditional tabletop radios. Computers are now considered radios. Phones are now considered radios. And so if you look at those numbers, all of a sudden that 7 that became 4.5 is now probably 8, 9, or 10. I have 4 people live in my house. There's 4 radios if they have 4 phones.
Right before we started recording for the radio show, my husband came in behind me and you saw what he had in his hand. He grabbed the Alexa because he was heading outside and he was going to do some yard work and he wanted to be able to listen while he was outside on the porch.
Hey, Alexa, play the best radio station in the world. The River, 95.3.
Yeah, but she's outside, so she can't hear you right now.
It's funny. I just said that, and my tablet just said, "What do you want to hear?"
Yeah. So when we're done with this, I'm going to make you say, Alexa, play the Valley Today podcast by Janet Michael, and she will do it for you. How awesome is that?
I could be the voice for Alexa.
No, don't do. No. We're not going down that road. We're not going down that road.
I can hear Alexa going, Andrew.
No. I will tell you, though, that the voice of Siri follows me on Twitter, but that's a whole nother show, too. I sat in on a webinar that you did a couple of months ago for a lot of the radio station advertisers and clients. And it was about things that you shouldn't do in a recession or a downturn in the economy. And the big overarching theme was not to go dark.
Right.
Explain why not going dark is a big deal, that you shouldn't do it.
But basically, it's the longer that you are top of mind awareness goes away from people, the longer it takes for you to regenerate that top of mind awareness. There are two types of clients in the world: people who are ready to buy something right now, and people who are going to buy something 60 days or 90 days or 3 years from now. We'll take automobiles for an example. The average person buys a new car about every 3.5 to 4 years. So if you just bought a car about a year ago, you're probably not in the marketplace for a new car. But you're still going to want to hear what's available, because one of two things will happen. In a couple years, when you are ready to buy a car, you'll remember some of the good things you heard about car dealership X, Y, or Z, or they might have such a great deal that you're ready to buy it now. But if you take away that messaging, if you don't remind people who you are and what you do, by the time you get back to being able to do so, somebody else probably has continued to remind people who they are. And top of mind awareness is extremely important when it comes to the psychology of advertising. Your message is going to get buried because they're not going to recognize you anymore. And by going dark, you basically said, when you're ready to buy, I'm going to have to double my efforts to get you to pay attention to me, which means you're going to have to spend 3 or 4 or 5 times more money than if you just maintain some low level of acknowledgement or even just a thank you campaign. Hey, we can't open up right now, but we want to thank you for your past patronage. When things are ready and we're clear to go, we're going to let you know, and so you can come back to see us. So by going dark or just pulling off of certain mediums, what you're going to do is really triple or quadruple the work effort you're going to have to put in and the amount of money you're going to put back in to get back to where you were. Back in 2008, when a lot of companies went dark because of the recession we had back then, it was borderline depression in 2007, 2008. A lot of businesses never recovered from that, simply because they stopped advertising. They stopped inviting people to come in, and they stopped reminding people who they were. And in small retail in particular, it's so important because who are we fighting? We're fighting Amazon. We're fighting Walmart. We're fighting big companies that will continue to advertise. If you're a small mom and pop doing insurance, you're fighting against Geico. Well, Geico is the number one advertiser week after week. They spend more money than any other advertiser, not just insurance companies, but every advertiser. So in order for your message to be heard and remembered, you have to maintain some level of fight against the Geicos of the world. And I hate to give them advertising because God knows they pay for enough. But it's true. It's psychology 101. This has everything to do with marketing 101 and making sure that small town America, Main Street America, has an opportunity to be competitive with the big companies of the world.
I will tell you, I've seen commercials for eBay on TV that I had never seen on TV before. So they are taking that advice and deciding, hey, now is the time. But what do you say to a business that did go dark in March? Is it too late for them? What kind of advice would you give them to try and get themselves back into a better position?
They need to ramp up immediately. They need to sit down and come up with a message. And whatever that message happens to be, hey, we went away for a couple months, but we're back and we're ready to serve you. And this is how we're going to serve you. This is making the customer, the consumer, feel more comfortable and confident with what they're doing. The radio station's doing this. We had a promotion in June called the Great American Comeback. giving members of the audience a chance to win. We gave advertisers a reason to come back and advertise with us. And by the way, a couple of our advertisers won free advertising packages. And so the idea was to bring people back to the fold of what marketing and advertising is all about. I've always said advertising is not a step away from programming. If it's good, it's part of the program. And particularly in small market radio and small market America, running good campaigns of good advertising and good marketing is nothing more than a public service announcement that someone happens to be kind enough to pay for. Because I want to know who the grand openings are. I want to know who's having specials and sales. I want to know what my neighbors are doing. The guy who opened up the bookstore, the girl who opened up the coffee shop. I want to hear about what they're doing and how they're serving the Northern Shenandoah Valley. That's what we do.
So it's not too late.
No. Bottom line is it's not too late, but you really need to start now. You need to start crafting that message and don't hesitate. Get with a professional that sits down and says, okay, what should I talk about? Because you're probably really good at making pots of coffee, but you're probably not real good at crafting a message about that pot of coffee. We can help do that. Advertising professionals, small market radio, small market television and newspaper, we can help you craft that message so that you can immediately get back in the game and fight against the big companies and have some sense of belonging and being in today's commerce.
Well, and I will just say, if you're a coffee shop owner and you're listening to this right now, I would love for somebody to pay me to drink their coffee and talk about it on the air.
Hey, why not have a coffee shop sponsor the Valley Today?
Yeah.
It's the official coffee of the Valley Today.
I got no problem with that. They'd have to change their corporate colors to have orange in it. But other than that, I'm easy to work with.
You couldn't have a better spokesperson than Janet Michael talking about coffee. That's the thing she's known for.
Well, Andrew, thank you for taking some time out of your afternoon to have this conversation with me. It has been a blast as usual.
I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and to talk to my friends. It'll be 20 years in mid-August that people have invited me into their homes, and people have invited this station and this company to be part of the journey with them in the Valley. I have truly appreciated every minute of it. My family has greatly appreciated the opportunity to serve and allowed us to do what we do. And like I said before, everybody at the station loves what we do. It's nice that we can make a living at this, and not that anybody would do it for free. But I got to tell you, if nobody ever got paid for a job, any job, this is where people would want to come.
Oh yeah, Gaz and I say that frequently when we're on the air together, but it's usually in the vein of, we are not in this for the money.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you truthfully, after 20 years, I'm not in it for the money either.
Isn't that right? We are going to wrap up today's conversation with Andrew Shearer. He is the owner of the River 95.3 and Sports Radio 1450. Tomorrow is Tourism Tuesday. As you are listening to the show, we are going to be chatting with, I think, Sally from Shenandoah National Park to talk about how they have come through all of the phases and what is currently available now in Phase 3. Gina Hilliard from Luray Page Chamber of Commerce is going to join me for that conversation. So maybe back here a few minutes after noon, and I will have that show ready to go for you.
Ta-da!
And scene.
Is that what we were looking for?
Huh?
That was what we were looking for?
Yeah, that was it. That's good. It's probably a little long, but who at the station's going to tell me I'm in trouble for having the owner on the radio too long?
Yeah, I don't think you have any issues at all.
Well, and Lonnie keeps telling me, you've got 47 minutes. Use as much or as little of it as you want. I really don't care. It doesn't make my job any easier, any harder.
I'd heed that advice.
Oh, I have. There have been times when it has been pushed to the limit. Oh, but I do have to tell you, so this is hilarious. Gaz was going to do the show on Thursday. He is always, most of the time, probably 95% of the time, he is live because he feels like he's lying to people if we pre-record it. It's a whole thing. So he sends me a text. I'm on my way into the station on Thursday at like 11:15. He sends me a text and tells me that he is not sure he's going to make it, that there was a high-speed chase from West Virginia into Virginia and back into West Virginia, and then the suspect fled on foot, and they were still trying to find him. So he didn't know if he was going to be done and back in time, but if he got done, he might be able to call in and do the show that way if Lonnie could set it up. Well, I don't do phone. It's my thing. I don't do phone. Phone conversations are horrible. So I sent him back a text and said, sorry, we don't have the capability to do a phone interview in the studio, which isn't untrue because Rodney disconnected all of that for the prod room. 10 minutes later, I get a text from Gaz that says, I'm leaving West Virginia, heading your way. He did not
I'm a fugitive. I'll be there.
So then I guess it was 20 minutes later, I get a text and it says on 66. So I sent back lights and sirens, buddy. And then like 5 minutes later, he says, I'm at the bridges. And Kathy and I are looking at each other going, how the hell fast was he going that in 5 minutes he was on 66 and then at the bridges?
Lights and sirens.
He did not want to give up his 23 minutes of fame on the radio.
That's my Vern.
I know. And then we got into a rather heated conversation in the second half of the show because I asked him, since I'm in Middletown and we have our own police force and Stephen City has their own police force, but Frederick County Sheriff is the umbrella sheriff's office, do places like Middletown have to consult with Frederick County when they decide they're going to have larger events that they're going to need some help from? And he's looking at me because he knows what I'm doing. And he's like, well, Janet, they don't really have to consult, but they usually reach out to ask us and blah, 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 blah. He goes, and I think I know what you're talking about. I said, I'm talking about fireworks. Can we just talk for a minute about how ridiculous it is that the town of Middletown is hosting fireworks in a town of 1,300 people and they go on national news and tell everybody that they're doing it? It's going to be a train wreck. And I want to know, are you going to come keep people out of my driveway?
Yep.
We went into this whole 10-minute of him saying, well, now it's not that bad. It's this Middletown's opportunity to shine. I'm like, please. We have one restaurant and a Dollar General. What are we shining for? Yeah. He probably should have stayed with his little felon running around and
yeah. I think he was hoping he'd show up in Warren County. I'm going to go stake it out.
Right. All right, my dear. Well, this will be on the air a few minutes after noon on Monday. And usually as soon as the show starts, I put the podcast up on the website and the YouTube video up on YouTube. So in case you miss it, you'll be able to see it there.
Well, thank you. I may try and find me in multiple ways.
Yeah, that's my standard. And then they're like, oh, okay. And then someone will say, can you send me the link? And I'm like, yeah. And
can you send me the link?
Yeah. It'll probably be my air check.
I was going to say, that should be your air check this week.
Perfect. All right. Well, go finish chopping down your trees.
Thank you.
Bye.
See ya.